Thank you very much for joining us today as we host another Cboe Canada NewsFlash, where we ask questions of industry experts, thought leaders, visionaries attached to capital markets about views and insights, new things going on in the business, everything we think of interest to advisors and investors. My name's Eric. I'm our global head of company listings for Cboe, and I'm incredibly excited to be joined by Stephen Matier, President and CEO at Maritime Launch Services, ticker symbol MAXQ, listed on Cboe Canada. Stephen, thanks very much for joining us today. Great to see you.
Thank you. Great to be here. Very much my pleasure.
So some quick housekeeping, and then I want to leave as much time as possible for conversation and discussion with you. We're here for 20, 25 minutes plus or minus, so it's meant to be a quick, snappy newsflash update on all things going on in the Maritime Launch Services business. To our audience joining us today, ask your questions in the chat box. I'm watching. I'm a quick typer. Promise we'll answer them. If we don't get to them, we'll share them through with Stephen afterwards, and we'll make sure we follow up with you to keep the dialogue moving. And for those of you new to joining us, if you saw about the Maritime Launch Services newsflash today, follow us on social and make sure you don't miss another one going forward. So, Stephen, since it's been a little while, and I know a number of things have moved around as the team and I have been chatting with you and your team as you navigate through the new year, maybe just for our new investor base, give us a very short overview primer on the Maritime Launch Services business, purpose, history, your role, and then we can get into what's new.
No, fantastic. Happy to. You have to begin by talking about the commercial space economy and where that is and where it's going, and that points to demand at the end of the day. Space economy, gosh, at the end of 2022 was nearly $500 million US globally, and it's on a pace for $1 trillion, depending on who you ask, as early as 2031, but certainly no later than 2040, it's going to be at $1 trillion per year. And that space economy is all about the services that are being provided in space to people, whether it's global broadband, near-Earth imaging, remote control of vehicles, Internet of Things, those kinds of things. And then you step back from there, those satellites, guess where they're made? They're made on Earth. And guess what you have to do? You have to launch them. So the real trick and the real bottleneck of the entire sector is really launch. Out of that 464 billion I mentioned earlier, 10 billion of it is launch in 2022. So that tells you kind of where that bottleneck is and how the entire industry is built about getting satellites into orbit. So, in steps Maritime Launch Services and what we're doing with this location in Nova Scotia. The market for putting satellites into orbit is you need to be near an ocean, preferably, and you need to be able to put these satellites into the right place in orbit. And really, that is the bottom line of what we provide. It's that adage about location, location, location. That's what we are. We're a spot in North America on a peninsula of Nova Scotia, hanging over the top of the North Atlantic with nothing but ocean all the way down to South America and over to Africa and over to Europe. And it's that huge expansive ocean that gives us that real leverage and that advantage. So we've been working to bring the spaceport developments here to Nova Scotia for a number of years. Went public, almost 3 years ago now. And, excuse me, and really making some hay in the recent days and weeks with respect to the development of our spaceport and working with our government clients, our launch vehicle clients, our satellite clients, and the spaceport itself in Nova Scotia.
It's an incredibly unique story, and kind of tickles the fancy of dreams and childhood ambitions of going to space, and for it to be in Canada on top of that, incredibly cool to watch. And indeed, 2022 April, if I'm not mistaken, was your go public in Canada with us. But on the note, you mentioned a few things, and certainly don't want to steal your thunder, but at the very least, lead you down a pathway of what is pertinent and interesting to the investor base. You've recently had some incredible news and a few interesting pieces of updates on the business around funding. What does it mean for you and the team? Who's it from? Give us a bit of a primer on that press release in case as an investor I might have missed it.
Yeah, thank you. So the press release a week ago was essentially a commitment from the Government of Canada for what is called a Strategic Innovation Fund. And that fund essentially helps companies like ours develop innovations. Go figure, right? And so the title. So we got a $12.9 million term sheet last week, or just the week before, at the end of the week before, and had to press release that on Monday about that reimbursement program that they've committed to in supporting us. And that's kind of one of a snowball of things that have been going on, but a very, very important one that we've had in the news as of late. You know, we did also get a similar reimbursement program commitment from the province of Nova Scotia. That was in the middle of late last year for about $13 million, plus the 12.9 the federal government has provided as well. We have the government of Canada is committed to that regulatory framework for launching from Canada, which is a first ever. Recent news is that Global Affairs Canada has been working on a treaty, essentially on our behalf, with the United States to be able to get satellites and launch vehicles from the U.S. up to Canada. Pretty important piece of work that has been undergone for quite some time now and getting very close to the finish line. That was in an article posted by Space Q magazine recently that speaks to that commitment from the federal government to move this process forward. And then you couple that with some of the other things that we've been talking about on social channels. We had a client from Europe out here with a launch vehicle developer kicking the tires and looking at the site. And now we're starting to, we have a letter of intent with them and starting to work on a full lease agreement. We have a client in Florida that wants to bring satellites up here to and have a facility developed up here that they'll be able to put satellites into launch vehicles. We had another commitment from a client to build us a tracking station. So you can see these big pieces of this puzzle, right, that are all fitting together. You got the regulatory, you got the money, you've got the rocket, you've got the tracking, you've got the satellites, and you got the location, and it's all fitting snugly together into this real milestone for us going forward. When you look at other countries, let's say the Five Eyes countries, UK, New Zealand, the US, Canada, and Australia, you know, we're there almost. You know, you have to have finance support from the government financially, from a regulatory perspective, and with the safeguard agreement. Now we've got kind of all three of those about across the line, especially with this latest announcement last week about the reimbursement agreement from the Strategic Innovation Program. So really, you know, pedal to the metal, and I'm now freaking out about getting my staff up and running and adding to it to really get the show on the road.
Well, it's a multifaceted, multi-pronged project that you and the team have to deliver on, and it's not a tiny one. You're dealing with stuff that goes up into space at some point in time, and having all of that done to spec and meeting everybody's requirements and safely, all things that have to come together at the same time. If you kind of take all of that you've shared with me now and with our audience about short-term, immediate things, mission, vision, things that are, you know, on the horizon of getting done or close to being complete. If you start fast forwarding into that 2 to 5 year plan for you and the team, what does that start to shape up to? Because I'm hearing a lot of great pieces starting to come together. What does that strategic plan look like for you?
Well, indeed, and it's a great question. You know, where we've been has been fantastic, and where we're going is even more fun. And we sort of did a transition about a year ago where we were looking at a model more as a customer supplier, and now we're looking at a model where we're leasing subsets of facility to launch vehicle customers. So, you know, you can list the name of them from Europe and the US that are building their launch vehicles that need to find a permanent home to be able to launch them frequently. So the goal over the next year is, I mentioned the letter of intent with the European launcher. We've got one with the US launcher as well. We're looking to build out a couple of these locations within our 335-acre, 40-year lease that we already have in place. EA's approved, construction started, roadways have been cut down to the pad site, is essentially getting a couple of these pads up and running. So we're going to do another suborbital launch later this year with our own rocket, and that's really about exercising the system, airspace and waterways and control of public access. But the real show will be getting ready for that orbital launcher a little over a year from now, that we will be putting our first satellite into orbit on behalf of a launch client. So the launch client will bring the rocket. We'll have the facility developed enough to launch that rocket and put their client satellites into orbit. We'll build a second pad. So our goal over the next 3 to 5 years is really getting 2 pad sites up and running completely and launching multiple times per year, generating that revenue for them and for us, and these 2 active stands, and then looking at expanding to the larger launch vehicles later on. At the end of the day, there's still a demand for a larger rocket that can launch dozens at a time instead of 6 at a time. So we do want to target that quote unquote medium class market. So 5,000 kilograms to low Earth orbit sort of range. So we do want to have a couple more pad sites that we've identified for doing a medium class launcher. So it's a stepwise approach. It's not a field of dreams. Let's do our Pathfinder. Let's get rocking and launching. Let's generate that revenue. Keeps everybody happy and the ball rolling, and then we start expanding those operations. And we have been approached internationally about other places that want to build out to this idea of a commercial launch site. At the end of the day, they've been government ranges historically. But if we're a commercial space economy, eventually these places really need to be more commercially oriented, which is one of the key things that we offer, is that flexibility that comes with being a commercial launch site in Canada and being able to launch frequently. That's where I think that whole industry has got to migrate to. If they're commercial satellites, commercial services, commercial rockets, why can't they be commercial spaceports? And that's really that piece that's so unique for us as well.
I like it. And what I'm hearing as undertones, scale and build the business responsibly as you can build the pipeline around it, rather than a complete build it and hope they come type of approach. It's scale up the business in pieces as you've got some certainty on demand, make sure that the throughput and the rest of the business is able to support you. Something certainly we've got experience in. I also like the idea of proving that it works. It's an incredible validation to your client base, future and hopefully current, and something that expresses a layer of confidence in your own capabilities to do it with your own efforts. So that's something else to be noted. We did have one question from the audience, which I'd love to entertain, just around each new launch vehicle's need for environmental studies or permits, or if that's all already taken care of as a part of the process.
Yeah, it's a great question. So the environmental approval we got in 2019 was for a much larger rocket. It was for 5,000 kilograms of payload capacity with a whole range of propellants on board that can launch it successfully and go into orbit. Most of the launchers that we're entertaining, if not all of them, have the same kinds of propellants, only smaller quantities. So the idea of from an environmental perspective, we're actually making much less of an environmental impact associated with these smaller rockets than we've already qualified for the larger rockets. So even doing 2 small launchers is still only about 40% of what we're already approved for from a launch potential from the rocket size and the payload size and the amount of propellants and handling associated with it. So that's not to say that we won't keep and we don't keep in close coordination with our partners at Nova Scotia Environment and Climate Change, keeping them updated on what we're doing and essentially making sure that they have what they need to approve us as we move forward.
Brilliant. Well, thank you. And I think that's a very elegant and fulsome answer just on transparency, communication. You're working with people on a new project, new business, keeping them up to speed on progress and advancements in the business plan, an important part of it. On the note of keeping folks updated, I'm an investor. Say I'm new to looking at MaxQ as a business opportunity and investment. Why should an investor be thinking about you at this stage in your journey? What's kind of triggering some of the conversations with investors today that you might be able to share with us?
Well, it is really about the de-risk that's been accomplished, right? When you look at where we started and some of the early investors that were taking more of a risk and getting going with us. We've already invested $20 million to date to bring us to this point. We've got the provincial partners, the federal partners, ISED, Space Agency, Transport Canada, Global Affairs, D&D, got support from the U.S. and the FAA, Space Force, those kinds of entities, support from Europe, support from launchers around the world that are demanding more launch capability. So it really boils down to when you look at all the complicated stakeholders that are lined up and getting them all comfortable with what we're doing. It's crossing all of those lines, right? I mean, if you look at the five big pieces, the finance is a significant portion of it. Having a reimbursement program that essentially covers about half of the build on a reimbursable basis is pretty important. Having the regulatory approvals, pretty important. Having the site and the approvals to use it, that's pretty important. Having the launch vehicle clients and the satellite clients, the fourth and fifth items in the list, all those things are really, from my perspective, really quite in place now. And it's just a matter of the next phase of execution, right? So with a continuing suborbital Pathfinder orbital launch, and then it's multiple launches thereafter.
I like it. I'll maybe have time for one more question from the audience, and then it is a news flash, so it is a speed round update on content and coverage and all things going in the business. But it sounds like, Stephen, you've got a pretty broad and interested group of investors that are always keen to hear from you, which is tremendous to hear. Your government funding, I gather, conditional on meeting some terms. Anything you can discuss, share with your investor base on timeline, what the terms were, and how and when they might be met that you're able to share with us today?
The terms for what? I'm sorry?
For the SIF.
Well, the terms were more related to the payback program that they have, so some of the terms are you have to have a certain amount of hiring, different kinds of people, associated with the project. You have to have some students that you're going to be hiring over the next few years. You've got to have commitments with some support from some universities, which we already have with St. Francis Xavier University, Cambridge University. They're both working on air emissions programs, water sampling programs that they've developed on our behalf. So a lot of them are those kinds of supplementary requirements that go along with it. Yes, they want to see some maturity on the launcher. We've been providing that along the way, et cetera, and some of these other pieces that have come together here very recently that I can't go into too much. But a lot of them are really, I genuinely look forward to them because they're parts of what we've been planning all along.
Brilliant. No, I think that's a good start, and then the rest will have to follow in formal comms as and when you're ready, so as not to disclose anything you shouldn't. So thank you for being mindful of that.
Yeah.
With that, Stephen, I wanted to give you one last chance. Anything else that you didn't manage to cover, given we've got an investor base online today? Anything else that you wanted to share that I didn't ask you about over the course of our short update today?
Nothing leaps to mind. We're really looking forward to this next phase and ramping up. Keep an eye on our website. We'll be posting some hiring positions here coming up pretty quickly. Once you reach a milestone like this and you realize, oh my gosh, now I got to fully execute on this thing. I'm flipping through. I've been doing this for 30 something years, so it's not like my Rolodex is empty. But it is certainly time to now picking off those key people that we need to get in to help getting this going. We've had a lot of wonderful support in the province from companies like Nova Construction and Lindsay Construction, Nova doing our road work and Lindsay doing our construction management activities, a lot of environmental firms that have been helping us to date, and we'll continue to really use a lot of those skills that are available. But that's really what I'm looking forward to most. This is that part of the project that's exciting, is populating that team and executing.
I love it. And I remember those stages in our journey where you've got this vision, mission, all the pieces are in place. And now it's strictly about bringing the best group forward you possibly can and delivering on the mission, which is something I know your investors will continue to be interested in. Stephen, thank you very much for sharing 20 minutes of your Monday afternoon with me. Really appreciate the update, as I'm sure our investors do, and really excited for a follow-on conversation. Please do keep us up to speed on your advancements, and we look forward to hosting you for another Cboe Canada Newsflash or perhaps a spotlight at some point in the future as we reach some of these next major milestones. So with that, I'll say thank you very much for joining me, and
Yeah,
good luck as you work to continue the space mission with Maritime Launch Services.
my pleasure. Totally. Thank you
Thanks,
very
Stephen. Have a
much.
great day. This is Cboe Canada signing off.